So the first thing I'd like to say is thank you to Jan for setting this up and to the entire team who've been incredibly efficient and professional. So that's been fantastic. I've got an unusual presentation, I think, in the current context. I think there are three kinds of well-being papers. The first of which is what things make us happy. The second of which is much, much smaller and is linked to the validation literature, is what do happy people do in their lives? Do they quit their jobs, quit their husbands, things like that? And then the third, which I'm going to contribute to here, is using well-being data in an instrumental way, not quite how Claire described it, but as a tool to understand social or economic phenomena. And I'm going to contribute to the third of these kinds of well-being research. I should say that this is joint work with Richard Layard and Maria Cotofan, both at the London School of Economics. And the question, which is a very old question, is how much inequality is there? And I'm going to look at this in a labour market context. So I'm going all the way back to Adam Smith. You know that you can find everything in Adam Smith if you look hard enough. And the question I'm going to ask here is how much inequality is there on the labour market? And this is, it's a priori a very simple question. Who ends up getting what? Who ends up getting more? Who ends up getting less? What are the systematic patterns and how do they come about? The difficulty here is that the returns, as economists like to call them, the returns we get are partly pecuniary, that's our pay packet, and they're partly the non-pecuniary amenities of our job. How much do we like doing it? How nice are the people we work with? Is it dangerous? Is it fulfilling? Things of that nature. And historically, and historically means up to about yesterday, we don't have good data on these non-pecuniary amenities. So we are a bit stuck. The theory of compensating differentials says that if you have a nasty job, you'll get paid more to do it. The anti-compensating differential or rent sharing approach or result would be that able people, however you want to define able, are able to earn higher incomes and have nicer jobs at the same time. So this is a question about what we call compensating differentials. Do they exist on the labour market or not? And if we take job amenities into account, what can we say about inequality on the labour market? And that's our big question. And as I say, we don't have information on job amenities, so we've run into a bit of a dead end on that one, until, of course, we appeal to subjective well-being data. And instead of trying to measure job amenities and then trying to infer how much these matter to different people, and you may care a lot about work-life balance and somebody else doesn't. Other people may like risk, other people are averse to it. So there's no standard set of preferences. Instead of doing that, we're going to infer the value of a job from subjective well-being data. So we're going to be able to split up the returns from a job into the pecuniary earnings, the pay packet, and then the non-pecuniary value of different occupations. We're going to be looking at 90 occupations as inferred from the subjective well-being of the workers who work in those occupations. And we'll be able to make a statement about how unequal the labour market is and whether we've underestimated or overestimated it. And remember that a priori, we don't know which way round this goes. If there are compensating differentials, then we've overestimated the degree of inequality on the labour market. So we'll be able to make a statement about that, and then we can, using the same data in a sense, make statements about the gaps between men and women, between different ethnicities, and things of that nature. So for those of you with very short attention spans, this is the main result of the paper. We underestimate labour market inequality by only looking at income. And what does that mean? That means that people who earn more have nicer jobs. Okay, so this is rent sharing. This is not compensating differential where you earn more because your job sucks. This is not what's happening. We're finding the opposite, and the opposite to a fairly large degree, in that we estimate that the real degree of inequality on the labour market is about 1/3 higher than we would think just by looking at income data. Okay, so no evidence of compensating differentials in the UK or the US, whatever we do. Most of our results are going to be for the UK. We also try to placate our potential referees by doing analysis on US data as well. So that's the main result. You can switch off now if you wish. This is how we did it. We're going to be mostly using cross-section data. The 5 most recent waves of the annual population survey. This is the largest population survey in the UK, largest social survey in the UK. We're going to restrict ourselves to workers of general working age, 20 to 65. Our well-being measure, Claire, this is the best one. This is the one we should use. Life satisfaction, write it down. Life satisfaction, 0 to 10. And our earnings are going to be the log of hourly pay. And we have 3-digit occupations as classified by SOC 2010. Equations. We can't get by without an equation, right? So this is just very, very simple. It's an earnings equation. So it's a well-being equation, to get that right. Well-being equation of individual I working in occupation J that depends on a very small set of that individual's predetermined characteristics, their earnings, and then the occupation in which they work. So we're going to measure their well-being, holding their earnings constant. In a way, by definition, this is non-pecuniary returns to an occupation that's going to be picked up by the alpha 3J. It's not a very sexy term. We would probably should think of something better, but this has ended up being alpha 3J. So if we write, what am I trying to say here? If we rewrite equation 1 as depending on x's and the full earnings, well, that's just rewriting this, where we define full earnings as your log earnings in dollars plus the value of your occupation expressed in dollar terms. So it's just being commensurate. Okay, we're going to express everything in terms of dollars, and this is what we're going to call full earnings of an individual, pecuniary and non-pecuniary. The question: how unequal are full earnings compared to dollar earnings? And of course, the quick amongst you will have noted that that depends on the correlation between these two things. Okay, and that's what we're going to evaluate, and that's what's going to turn out to be positive. So there's more inequality than you think. Okay, this is the only, it's not quite the only equation, it's the only main equation. This is a cross-section life satisfaction equation on people living in the UK in the late 2010s, controlling for very little indeed. Remember that these are all workers, so they're all in work, in employment, and we get a fairly standard set of results. Women are a little bit happier than men. These are, this is standardized, I do believe. So this is 6% of a standard deviation. It's not huge, but it's there. And we get the classic U shape in age that everyone gets, but nobody can really understand, nobody can really explain. And then we have our occupation and ethnicity wave fixed effects. Okay, so that's the building block of what we're doing, and what we're going to be interested in are the occupation, I should stop doing this, are the occupation coefficients in this regression, of which there are 90. And that's going to show you what jobs are nice and what jobs are not nice, holding the income you receive in them constant. And this is the main result. We have a summary figure for the standard deviation of log earnings, and that's 0.5. We have a summary figure for the standard deviation of the value of different occupations, 0.38. And then we have a summary figure for the standard deviation of the value of those two things put together, and that's 0.68. There is no automatic relationship between these numbers. This could have been smaller than that, or it could have been larger than that. It depends on the coefficient of correlation. Are they correlated positively? Are they correlated negatively? Which is a statistical way of asking whether there are compensating differentials on the labour market. And that's what we're asking. And just to show you that this adds up, which it does, thank goodness, the variation of full earnings is just the variation of its two parts, the sum of the two parts plus the covariance. And this is what's going to be doing our work here. The covariance is, of course, the products of the standard deviations times the correlation coefficient, and the correlation coefficient is 0.14. Nobody is excited about that except me, okay? I'm excited about that because that means that people who earn more work in occupations that are more pleasant. That's what that 0.14 positive figure means, which is against compensating differentials. And I think that's coming on to all I wanted to say about that. We have the world's largest set of robustness tests and checks and specifications, and it's all awful. And we don't want to talk about that here, so we're not going to. Let me tell you, potentially, I think, just two more things. The first of which is that that's cross-section data. And unfortunately, we are not allocated to an occupation randomly. It'd be really nice if we were, but we're not. So we have this selection of types. Happy people go to some places and miserable people do PhDs, in economics only. So what we can do here is follow the same person over time as they change occupation from being a judge to being an economist or what have you, and see how their well-being changes as they make that change. So this is what we call within subject change. And then see whether the pattern of nice jobs, not nice jobs, is exactly the same or very different from that in the cross-section. And it turns out to be astonishingly similar. Astonishingly similar, the pattern, 15 minutes remaining, that says. 5, yeah. Okay, no, we're good. So this is astonishingly similar, which means that good jobs are good jobs, not just because happy people go there. They're really nice in a within-person sense that if you took them up, they would be pleasant. Okay, here's an illustration of the kind of thing we're looking at. You can't read this, and neither can I. These are, oh, that's come up really badly. Yay. You can't see that. That's a vertical line. You can't see that, can you? Can you? It's really rubbish, isn't it? That's better. Okay, that's better. It's magic. Let me illustrate our main findings here. Log earnings, so these are the 90 different occupations that we're looking at. Log earnings are given by the X. Okay, it's log hourly earnings given by the X. The full earnings, that's the value of your income plus non-pecuniary, is given by the bar. If the bar is to the right of the X, you've got a nice job, a nicer job than average. If the bar's to the left of the X, you've got a less good job than average. What you can see here, going down the occupational ranking, is that mostly at the top, the bars are to the right of the X's, mostly to the bottom, the bars are to the left of the X's. And that's just an illustration of that 0.14 correlation coefficient, okay? And it's not mechanical and it doesn't work for everybody. Let me give you, these are senior managers. So senior managers get paid a lot and they've got nice jobs. We made a good choice, okay? Health and teaching, if I can find those, it doesn't matter if I can't, but health and teaching, there. They have, no, it's not there, I can't find it. It doesn't matter. If we find health and teaching there, they have non-pecuniary values that are also better than average, even though they don't always pay very well. So those are very nice professions. Bad jobs, elementary jobs, routine admin, and those are going to be automatable, so I guess we're going to lose those bad jobs. And sales. Sales, absolutely, if anyone's ever worked in sales, they are absolutely, it's here. These are sales, so pay's not very good, but the non-pecuniary returns to sales occupations are absolutely dreadful. All right, I think that's pretty much most of what I wanted to say. Let me finish by telling you, just giving you an idea of the extent of the gaps on the labour market and how these change when we take non-pecuniary into account. I don't know if you can read this. This is a regression of dollar earnings, the non-pecuniary returns, and then full earnings, which is, of course, the sum of those two. The gap in returns by education is a little larger when we take non-pecuniary aspects into account. So the educated will earn more, but they have nicer jobs as well. The bigger movement we get is men and women. Men earn more than women, as you can see with that negative coefficient there. But women also have worse jobs in terms of non-pecuniary aspects, in the sense that they work in occupations that are less pleasant. And we underestimate the real gender gap on the labour market. It's about 1/3 higher than we think. And the situation, well, you won't be able to calculate this quickly, but the situation is even more striking with respect to some ethnicities. The black-white gap on the labour market is about 40% larger than we would guess only from the income that people earn. The white Pakistani gap is about 50% larger than we would estimate only looking at dollar returns or earnings. So I think that's it. I'm going to skip over the US results because they end up being exactly the same as those in the UK, of exactly the same nature. There's more inequality than you think, and it's about 1/3 higher than we would guess from just wages. This is a summary of all the things I've just said to you, and one of the most boring things is when people read through all the lines they've got on their slides. I mean, you can read that, right? You can read that. I don't need to say that. So this is the summary of what I think we find in this work. And the last thing I really wanted to say is we could not have carried out this analysis without information on the subjective well-being of the people who work in these different occupations, we would still be stuck in the non-observability of amenities, but we feel that you can use well-being data to infer the value of those amenities, and that's why we're so excited about it. So thank you very much.
Would you have thought of using job satisfaction instead of life satisfaction at any point? And secondly, there's quite a lot of within occupational variance in how people feel about their jobs. You've abstracted away from that, probably not unreasonably, but I wonder if you've looked into that.
The reason we didn't look at job satisfaction in the APS is that it's not measured. It's not one of the big 4 well-being measures in the APS. It is in understanding society, and the pattern of the results in the sense of inequality is very similar. The only qualitative difference is that non-pecuniary amenities are more important relative to income in job satisfaction than they are in life satisfaction, which is understandable because they're a central bit of your job, but not necessarily a central bit of the way you live the rest of your life outside of work. You asked me something else. This is SOC 3-digit. We can go... Yeah, I know, but this is already 3-digit occupations.
Yeah, I know, but you've got plenty of ends within each occupation.
I'm not sure APS gives you 4-digit occupation. Understanding society does, but it's got a sample that's about 80% smaller, which is a little bit of a worry. Let me just try and remember whether we did look at 4-digit in understanding society. Okay, thanks.
I wonder if you could just explain about, give us sort of a story as to why you don't find this compensating differentials bit. So the sort of story is you could do a sort of boring job. Let's say you're not very skilled, you could do a boring job, but then you could do a boring and dangerous job, and you should get paid more in the second circumstance. So you're telling me that you don't find something like that, or that's...
No, on average we don't. I mean, there are 2 forces at work here. One of which is if you do something that's unpleasant, usually you have to be compensated for it. That's the compensating differential. And the other of which is if you're an able worker who is in demand, in some sense, on the labour market, who has what we used to call bargaining power when we used to look at these things, then you can take part of your return in amenities and part of that return in dollars. And it seems that the rent, not rent sharing, but the way in which you take your rent from an employer is outweighing any kind of compensating differential, effect that might be at work here. One thing that would be interesting would be to ask which bits of the labour market look more like compensating differential and which bits of the labour market look more like rent sharing. And we did, I don't know if you remember this, Richard, we did do this, splitting the labour market up into people who work in the public sector and people who work in the private sector. And it's not perfect because not all occupations are well represented. This anti-compensating differential result is purely private sector. There's no evidence of this in the public sector, where the correlation between non-pecuniary amenities and dollars is essentially 0. But we still can't find any place where there are compensating differentials, not even when we look at minimum wage jobs. We went right down to people who had hourly earnings within whatever it was, 15% of the minimum wage level. And even there, we couldn't find strong evidence of a trade-off between the two. And you might imagine that minimum wage workers are those with relatively little bargaining power and who would need to be compensated. That was a very long answer, by the way, wasn't it? Did it work? Well, hold on. Let's go around and see if we've got any time.
I'd like to know if you considered, or you've not yet looked at the other 3 ONS. Were they absolutely out of the study? And if they were, have you considered how they might be influenced?
No. No, we didn't. We didn't.
And if not, why not?
It's partly because we're really a little bit wedded to this idea that life satisfaction is the most important of the 4. No, we could. I mean, we could. We could, sure. Sure, I mean, I don't know what does it mean to have effect? Could we do that? I guess, yeah. I mean, there are jobs where you have a lot of positive affect. Maybe that's a thing. I mean, my personal feeling, seeing as you asked, which you didn't, but I'm going to let you know anyway. I mean, my feeling is that eudaimonia and these kinds of things broadly determine life satisfaction, which is the ultimate measure. But that's my personal feeling, and I could be empirically wrong. And of course, we could use those other 3. Yeah.
Just the difference of status compared to actually how your status reflecting maybe aspects with life satisfaction, and then how your day is day to day could actually have a different impact.
Well, yeah. I mean, the question is, what's the ultimate measure of how good a job is? Well, I mean, it's actually not I should stop. It's not an obvious question. This is all the kind of work that Dan Benjamin and colleagues have been doing of what actually matters when you make a decision. Is it? I've finished. It's their fault. Tell them to stop. No, I should stop. Sorry. Who's in charge of this? Me or someone else? Shall we take one more question quickly? So I promise to answer quickly, and then I'll stop.
So I'm going to say it quickly because it's the same point. So I am from the Office for National Statistics, the home of the ONS4, and I would suggest the eudaimonic question would give you different responses, because analysis that we've done looking at income and the full 4 have shown that the relationship between eudaimonia and income is very different, and wealth in that instance plays more of an effect than income does. So I would suggest that what Sarah said.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we just, yeah.
So we did look at the eudaimonic question and work, and we find that your private sector, public sector, third sector thing is a good point. So we find that eudaimonia is higher for those in the public sector and the civil society sector, and those that look after the home as their primary occupation.
No,
and there are differences in terms of job security, etc., and in those analysis. So I think I'll share it on Twitter, but we've done it.
Yeah, remember I'm looking at occupation here. I'm not looking at sector. So I would be looking at occupations, cross sectors, but I entirely take the point. Okay, 3 people say the same thing, that means I should probably do it. Okay, so thank you very much. I should leave.